welcome to another episode of Words with Friends. In this season, we're taking things a little different, right? What we're having is big conversations with some of the amazing people that I've had fortunate to be able to collect friendships with along the way. And these are people that I am actively having big conversations with. So I wanted you to have the privilege of being able to listen in to one of these big conversations. And for our conversation today, I'd like to invite you to meet my good friend, Mr. Chris Lambert. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Phil. Thank you.
Now, Chris is here, and for those of you that don't know, Chris is a former professional athlete. He is an Olympian. He is a Harvard graduate. He's gone on to be a senior executive with a number of very, very well-known brands and been a consultant for a number of big brands under a different guise too. So Chris has been competing somewhere like his whole life in some way, shape, or form. So it seemed right that the word that we'd pick for you today, Chris, is that we are going to talk about competition. We're going to talk about it from a few different angles. And I'm guessing that you've been competing somewhere like your whole life. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I think one of the conversations around when you sort of reflect on your life as a professional sports person is how much of the competition came from the environment I was in versus came from me being in that environment. Did sport make me a competitor, or was I as good at sports because I was a competitor? And I think it's sort of a nature-nurture argument around our attitude towards what we see as competition. And when I look back on my life now, and I say it like I'm 80, but when I look back at the things I've accomplished, I see within all of it now the fact that the competition comes, from me. I'm by nature a competitive person, and it becomes like a hammer. To a hammer, everything's a nail, right? So to the competitor, everything's a competition, and you can tailor that. You can sort of make it more palatable, more polite, so that, in good company, I'm not competing at things around the house with my wife. I am able to chill. But when you open the door on it, it's in there ready to be utilized, your ability to compete. So when you ask if I've been involved in competition, yes, I've been in the arena of it in one way or another. But I think it's also something that you bring with you, as opposed to just a situation that you find yourself in.
So help others to be able to understand a little bit about your track record and your history. What are the key milestones where you felt that you've been competing, that you've gone on to be able to hit milestones of achievement? What might that be if we were to plot it as a track record from earliest moment to most recent one?
It's an interesting question. So I guess it's got to start with my sort of track career. I started pretty late. You'll hear people start in sports at like 11, 12. I started 15, 16. And I just ran because I was fast. I did a number of sports. Speed's always an attribute in sport. And it became something that the better I was at it, the more I liked to do it. I trained and prepared myself to race because I liked racing, because I liked to win. I liked racing because I was good at it. I owned it. And I could go out there and earn my way forward with something. So the first milestone has to be when I became good at athletics, and there was a year in there, what was it, 1999, just before I went to uni, where I only lost one race all year. I was winning things domestically, internationally, in my age group, and that was a real marker for me as an individual that I can excel on a global scale at something, not just, county or school, which are all great achievements. But as a marker for me, taking it to that level was a real milestone. And then off the track, there was, again, that same year, great competition in terms of where I wanted to go to school. I was recruited by Harvard. Now they don't do sports scholarships in the Ivy League, but they do encourage people to apply if they have something about them other than what they can do in the classroom, because the rate of entry is 8%, and that is a significant competitive situation where what do I bring to this community versus the other, thousands, hundreds of thousands of people that are trying to apply in order to be one of the 8% that makes it in through the door. So in those two examples, you've got like a very tacit, open, competition, because you're on the start line. Of course, it's a competition. And then you've got a situation where you may not realize it's a competition until you stand back and look at it and say, wow, I need to acknowledge that that's what this is. And the reason I think the acknowledgement is so important, because that's how you prime yourself to go into it. And from there, in terms of milestones, it's ongoing. Once you realize that that the things that you want, or the achievements that you want to sort of accomplish, are not independent and individual to your life. There are shared objectives that are out there. Somebody's going to get them. If I'm going to get that job, somebody else isn't. Then it instills within you the knowledge that competition is not a thing. Is not a scary word. It's not a thing to be afraid of. It's a thing to ensure that you recognize when you see, so that you can raise your game for.
Okay. And in raising your game for it, then that's a conscious decision that says, I'm either going to choose to compete in this thing, or I'm going to choose to maybe just pass and exist within this thing. And it can be like a switch that you can turn on or off.
Yes. So I'll give you two examples. So one is you're playing Monopoly with the family at Christmas. That's going to be the broadest one, and it brings up different memories for everyone, depending on your experience of doing.
I've heard stories from Lou about your competitiveness at Monopoly, so I just want to see how this comes out.
Okay, well, I'll probably tell a couple of lies to hide my savagery, but we all know the example, and it's a case of you temper your reaction given the environment. I don't need to be giving it in your face if I smash my aunt at Monopoly, because what's the point? Whereas when you're on the track, you've got the ability to let that sort of animal out in you a little bit more, and to give in, to the drive of competition. And there's an analogy in sprinting where you're either a racer or a trainer. Which is very simply, you've got some people who deliver their absolute best in training, and then can't quite get close to it in competition. And then you've got the other people who are great in training, they work super hard, but they unlock something new when they're under the competition lights,
right.
When they're in. And it's that sort of mental pressure of what a competition is that folds some people and brings the best out of others. So I think you've got to look at competition in the sort of context in which it's in. Do I need to unleash all that I am in terms of a competitive entity for this, game of Cluedo? Or can I, relax, have a drink with my friends, and if I lose here, it's no big deal.
Right. But save it till race day, save it till the other chosen matters that exist in your life, where you say, these are the days I'm going to bring it because this is worth it to me.
Exactly. No one can, in the modern society we've set for ourselves, we tend to think that you need to be always on. You've got to be on the gas all the time. You've got to be giving it 110% all the time. I disagree with that, because I've experienced it from a physical, situation of training yourself into the ground. You can't give 100% all day because something breaks. And, to quote the Matrix, the body cannot live without the mind. If your mind is in a position where you've overstressed it, you won't be at maximum performance for 100% of the time, even though you think you might be. So you need to be able to assess what is coming at you, assess how much of yourself you need to give it, and be able to vary those levels, right? So that this I can accomplish to my satisfaction with 80% of myself. And that's good, because that thing over the hill, I need 105% of myself for, and that's why I need to keep my powder dry for.
Do you ever win a race because somebody else pulled up injured? Somebody else didn't show up because they had some form of adversity?
Or because they showed up and they bricked it on the day and they couldn't handle the pressure. And other people have won races because I've done that, absolutely. And
How does
that's
it
part and
feel
parcel of it.
to win, though, when you know that you won because somebody else didn't show up or somebody else was dealing with an adversity?
So I think it's a great question, and I think it introduces my biggest sort of concept around competition, which is that, as trite as it might sound, the the first and realest competitions with yourself. So out there in athletics, it's a great sport for it because it's so individual. Um, if I run faster than I've ever run before, but I get absolutely spanked, what can I say? Whereas if I don't run as fast as I've run before, if I have a bad day at the office and I get tanked, then that's on me because I could have run faster. Now, the situation in between, which is what you asked about, is I have an okay day at the office, somebody else tanks it. Well, the objective was to win. So then I've secured my objective, which was the prize, but I can redress myself because I didn't deliver on the day. So, there's loads of different ways to frame what success is, but I think that we need to internalize the concept of competition because the idea of it is to bring the best out of ourselves. And then you put that in the context of where you are and see if the best of yourself is good enough to beat other people. If it is, fantastic. If it isn't, you come away, you prepare, you train, you improve, and you come back again.
Okay. So you've had to find yourself in a number of competitive environments, whether it was, to win the first races at county level, to get recognition into national level, to then be able to make the Olympic squad. And I even remember an accolade from you is that you were captain of the junior Olympic team for Great Britain at some point in your career. You've gone on to be able to make squads that have then gone and performed in big meets all around the world. You've then competed to get into a position of an elite school in a country that is not your home country. You've come away from that and then competed to be able to achieve big jobs and maybe muscle some other people out the way to be able to get there. The viewpoint I'm trying to get to is that if you are competing to win, does that mean that others are losing?
And I think it depends on the definition. If you are talking about competing versus or competing for something that is scarcity, yes, and the last example there of the job is the clearest definition of that. If 10 people interview for a job, only one of us is going to get it. And that just is part and parcel. Does that mean that, well, actually, let me come back on you because it's interesting in the way you frame that. Is the way that we always tend to frame competition is winning and losing.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea being that it's binary. You've either won something or you've lost. And that means that if you didn't win, then the loss is the devalued option, and we struggle to see the positives that we take from losing. Now, I'm in a job that I'm really enjoying at the moment. And when I interviewed for this role, I was interviewing with 4 other companies. They were all very interested in me. The pace of things meant I got to choose between 2. I had 2 offers. Before that, I'd been applying for roles for 6 months with varying degrees of no thank you. Now, if you look at the long term, you could say aggregate wise, I've lost that process because I heard back from maybe 20% of them, the roles that I applied to. So how can that be a winning hand? Well, it's a winning hand because at the end of the day, I copped a role with a 50% pay rise. So how we frame the concept of loss is really important because for a lot of people, the fear of defeat means that they don't open the door, because
Mm-hmm.
that rejection is hard to internalize and take. So yes, roundabout way of answering your question, to take home a scarce resource means that somebody else hasn't taken it home, but that's only a defined loss for them if they define it as such. Because anything that you haven't, completed is a learning opportunity to take something from it and develop for better next time.
And it's kind of, if they crystallize the moment in that given isolated circumstances, you can call it a loss. However, if you continue to have momentum in the direction that you're going towards, you can take the lessons from it and maybe it leads you towards a later victory.
Absolutely. And honestly, I know it sounds it sounds like, it sounds trite, right? It sounds like the kind of thing the coach says to you, oh, don't worry about it, you can better next time. But honestly, the fear of uh, labeling even yourself a loser is crippling for people. You know, it becomes something that prevents them from trying to exert themselves beyond where they currently are. And you know, we talk about things like, we used to saying, oh, you've got to give 110%, and people go, can't give more than 100%, man, it's just chit chat. And no, I disagree. That 10% of the 110%, that additional 10% is where you find abilities that you didn't have before. And you can't do that unless you put yourself in that pressure situation. If all you ever do is what you know you can achieve, you never develop, you never change. It takes stepping out of that comfort zone, risking loss, in order for you to tell yourself and show yourself and other people, wow, man, I've got more in the tank than I thought I had.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, you know, it's that, again, extrapolation of the first competition is versus yourself. Acknowledge that, take it on, you know, challenge yourself to be defeated, because in defeat you find out that actually I had more in the tank there than I thought I did. I got a lot closer than I felt I would. And that can teach you the confidence and the ability and what to work on to go better next
Is competition fair?
time. Yes and no. If the simple example, if the competition is how high can you jump, if I'm a foot taller than someone, I've got the advantage. Now, are our circumstances going into that equal? No. But are they in line with the rules of the competition? Yes, and therefore they are fair. So I think fairness is something that I align personally to the whatever the sort of the driving rules or regulations around a competition are, as opposed to any sort of equality of circumstances going in.
So there's fairness once you get into a predetermined set of criteria where winning is easily defined, and it's race day, it's how high you can jump, it's who runs this in the fastest period of time, etc. I think the world of athletics is probably one of the fairest, most level playing fields when it comes to performance. Take it outside of the arena, put it in the real world, and say, is it fair in a level playing field for people to be able to compete on the field of life? What would your answer be to that question?
Then my answer would be, it isn't fair. And the reason for that is that the simplest definition of fair to me is meritocracy. A situation in which your progress is defined by your ability. The best rise to the top because they are the best. And if that is because being the best means you're taller and you're taller, fine. If it's because it means you have a certain aptitude that you display better than other people, great. But what hampers that is life isn't a meritocracy. And I think we're all comfortable in that knowledge. There are other factors, there are other circumstances, there are other things, elements that are brought into the system that chip away at our ability to say that set of circumstances is a meritocracy. So you're right. The track is a great example of something that is. There's 8 lanes there. If you're fast enough to get a lane, then you're fast enough to compete against the other 8 guys, 7 guys. If you win, you go home. Done.
Okay.
But real life is like that.
You know, we've had some conversations on this offline, and it's very much a big public conversation right now. Is fairness and equality through race, right? Is there an unfairness in competition because of the color of someone's skin, because of the way in which they've been brought up, or the environment in which they come from? Have you ever experienced moments in your life where, when you're competing to either be on a team, when you're competing for a position at a college, competing for a job role in some way, where you felt like you've been coming at this from an unfair advantage, where you felt like actually you are, a foot, a pace, a step behind the rest of the pack before you even get to go?
Yes and no. I think it's a very interesting it's really interesting the way racial inequality presents itself in the workplace. Because on one hand, I'll give you an example. When Barack Obama was elected, you know, you got this image of this black man taking the imperial throne, you know, rising to the very top. And any of your listeners, you may well also remember, all the conversation at the time was about how America was now a post-racial place, because if there can be a black man at the very top, how could it possibly be, you know, a racially unequal society? And people will look at someone like me, for instance, and say, well, you've been to a great school, you earn good money, you know, you live in a nice place, all these other things. If you can achieve that, surely there's not racial inequality. Surely it's not as bad as people say. Why can't other people just achieve? You've done it. Why can't other people? But the point of racial inequality doesn't mean there are no doors open to you because of the color of your skin. It means that you might open a door and find out that it's just made harder for you to get in because of the color of your skin. And you don't know. You don't necessarily know, because you can't. You show up in a job interview, for instance. You don't know these people. You don't know this company. You know nothing. You're just there, you know, based on the basis of a piece of paper that matches a set of their requirements. And so you can't front load going in there expecting any sort of level of, you know, racial prejudice. You don't know, and it wouldn't be right to do that. But inherently, you know that somewhere in the system, the facts that we all see around us are that black people find it harder to achieve and earn the same things as white people do. And you either believe that that's because black people are inherently less able, or you understand that it's because there are ways that black people are prevented from achieving the things that they earn.
When was the first time you experienced or noticed that you might be in a competition and receiving some form of prejudice against that, some form of potential unfair advantage that you had to overcome? When was the first time you noticed?
So when I was 15, I earned my first international colours. I got to represent England and get this red and white tracksuit, and we were up in Sheffield at this race, and I wore it on the train down. I went to get a sandwich at the buffet car, and the guy, wearing, this is what, 1996, 7, something like that. This guy looks at me up and down in my tracksuit, sort of gives me a proud nod and says, "Oh, well done, kid, good for you. You don't always have it, you know, have the best of it, do you?" And I was like, "What do you mean I don't have the best of it?" He's like, "Oh, you know, you're kind. You don't always have the best of it." And I thought, you know, I knew what he was trying to say. And to this day, I know what he was trying to say. He wasn't trying to be offensive. He was trying to recognize an inequality that he knows exists and see that someone in front of him had managed to get through that. And I understand that. But it really crystallized for me at the time how open a fact it was that black people face that prejudice. And as a 15-year-old, I knew, because your parents tell you, but to have it really instilled and sorry, really illustrated in your face through an act that was meant as an act of kindness was quite a harsh lesson. And I think that was the first time that it was clear to me that not the circumstances I was in, not the wearing of my tracksuit, but that the notion of achievement was something that it was acknowledged would be harder for me to reach due to the color of my skin. Now, after that, again, it turns into a system of microaggressions, because you can't just be overtly racist in the workplace. Not in most workplaces, not in the sorts of places that I've been fortunate, you know, to work in. These are massive corporates with huge functions to do their best to protect their employees against this kind of thing if they were, you know, to be resident. But you start to see other things that crop into the gray area, the gray zone, the questionable area as to whether it's me, or is there something going on here? And I think the first time that I really came across that was I was doing a role a few years ago for a consultancy, and I kept being told by management that I was too aggressive. I was too difficult to approach. And I said, well, it's classic agency. We're understaffed, oversold. You're asking me to manage the work of 12 people with 7 people. I'm working 18-hour days. I'm probably a bit cranky. No, but staff find you very aggressive, very difficult to approach. Now, I'm a competitor. I'm fierce. I'm physically imposing. I'm a large human. I'm not aggressive. I'm a very calm person. I'm very measured. I channel my aggression when I need it. It doesn't just spill out all over the place. And I started to talk to other people and to look into this and look into the Black experience in the corporate world. And it's small things. It's the death by 1,000 cuts. It's the you and a counterpart will be just as driven and just as dedicated to getting stuff done, because I was getting stuff done. But somebody else's drive is your aggression. Somebody else's always just focused is always difficult. He's difficult to approach. I think Black women suffer it a lot more, but it's you become aware of the fact that the judgments that are assessed and assigned to you are not done in the same way to your colleagues and peers. Now, it's a difficult one to communicate because people sitting at home, reasonable people will think, oh yeah, but I've seen that, and he was aggressive. I was there. I know. I've seen a guy in that situation. He was aggressive. Oh, I've seen a person like that, and yeah, they were just out of order. And then it all boils down, and people go, oh, is he just playing the race card? But I don't need. I have no need to play a race card because I have achieved regardless. Me looking back at this is me saying, I am wise enough now to understand that some of those things that seemed innocuous at the time, because I'm a reasonable person. When I'm challenged on my behavior, I question it. I interrogate myself. I look at the track record that I've laid there. But when you step out of it and see that so much of it is something that is assigned to an image of you as a person, as opposed to your actions as an individual, then again, it becomes something that you realize is a lot more prevalent than you thought.
Okay.
That was sort of
a question further on that, and this is coming from a position of curiosity more than anything else, is perhaps it's a bias of mine, perhaps it's an opinion of mine, but something I've almost witnessed through my lens in the corporate world is sometimes if an opportunity is provided to a Black person or any other minority, is the leadership think that they are doing that other person a favor, and
absolutely.
then still claim the victory of the fact that their success is actually a gift that has been provided by elsewhere. And it has this feeling of holding power over, even if an opportunity is granted. Have you ever witnessed anything like that? Is that anything that you could talk to?
Absolutely. So in my last role, I won't blow the company up, but we had some senior people in our team leave, so there was more and more work. And of course, look, Chris, we'd love you to be able to look after some of these work streams for us. I'm like, okay, look, let's have the conversation. I can take on some of these work streams, but you've got to understand that you're effectively now asking me to do the job of two, ended up being a job of about 2.5 people, and you're not offering me any additional pay here. Now, if you want me to do that to sort of prove myself out, that's fair, that's fine. That's how it works. That's how you get that 110%. But, let's address the fact that at the end of this rainbow, I'm expecting there to be a pot of gold, not a pot of shit, right? Once I've done this, there needs to be some compensation, because otherwise, what am I doing it for? You're just mugging me off. And we actually had that conversation. They were like, oh, totally understand, totally realize. And at the end of the year, in my appraisal, they said, you've sort of been touch and go on a lot of the work that you've got to do, and you haven't spent as much time, showing face and being visible as we would have liked. And I was like, well, of course I haven't. What did you think? How was I supposed to do 2 jobs for the price and time of one and be more visible? That's an impossibility. What were you expecting was going to happen? Yeah, it's quite difficult, because other people and et cetera, et cetera. So didn't go my way. And then I extended into the next year, where at the end of the year, and this was my last appraisal right before I left the business, my manager actually said to me, look, we are going to give you a course of, the appraisals are out 4, 3 out of 4 is your standard. We're going to give you the 3 out of 4, but really think you should be quite grateful for that. And I sat back and said, you want me to be grateful for the fact that I've done 2 jobs for you now for the best part of 18 months with no extra pay, and have continuously informed you that it was unmanageable, that work would have to drop, and you've said, sure, understandable. And then at pay review time, you've reneged on that, and you want me to be grateful for giving me a passing grade. And that was the position they maintained. And so, you're absolutely right. I've seen it from other people. And again, none of this is to suggest that this is an exclusively Black employee experience. It happens to people, but it happens disproportionately to Black people. And that's what a lot of the conversation around equality is. It isn't saying these things only happen to Black people. They happen to me too, so you're playing a race card. No, they happen disproportionately to Black people.
Okay. What would you say to the counter argument about competition, where people just come back with either a version of, it's not fair, like life's not fair, kind of get over it, or similarly, well, it can't be that much harder for Black people because look at LeBron James, look at Beyonce, look at, 2/3 of the NBA. Do you see the NBA players complaining about the fact that there's not more white players in the NBA, right? Like when I hear those complaints back, that makes me think a lot. But what do you think about, that kind of response to life's not fair? Look at these examples where there's a polarizing success in the other direction for people who are Black.
Yeah. I think, look, that comes back to the meritocracy piece, right? LeBron James is paid as he is because he's the best. Now, if you're the best at something, your skin color becomes irrelevant. And there's many reasons for that. One is because the performance of the sport itself cannot be denied. 2 is because it earns people a metric shit ton of money, right? LeBron James makes people a fortune. He sells shirts, he sells shoes, he wins trophies, he puts people in seats. Now, you can discriminate against him based on the color of his skin if you want, but what corporations want is to exist, right? Corporations want to survive. When they get a cash cow like that, they're not going to risk anything, in terms of being able to keep that. Now, the question around sport, and music's the same thing. Beyonce is Beyonce because she is one of the best in the world at what she does. And that kind of thing, cannot be denied. So I think in sports and entertainment, the power of the dollar is more powerful in many cases than the discrimination that would attempt to restrain people and hold them back. But I understand the argument. But again, it comes back to that point of, oh, well, if Black people are doing okay in this example, that example, then maybe the racism isn't as bad as you think. But how many LeBron James are there? And to your point, right. Yeah, the NBA is majority Black sport. But it's a sport in which physical conditions are a precursor to being able to enter. And if Black people are more capable of those conditions, or more prone to those conditions, then they'll have an advantage. And then the flip side question of that is, why are there so many Black people in basketball? And a lot of that is because other sports aren't as accessible to them. Basketball is basically free. You need a ball and you need a hoop, and those things exist in community settings. why are there no black players in golf? Is it because they're less athletically able? Is it because they can't do the physics? No, it's because it's a damn expensive sport to get into, to afford lessons for, to buy equipment for. And, you know, if you look along income-based lines, you know, black communities don't share in that same wealth, and so for those sports are less, you know, accessible to them. So there's loads of factors in it that define why certain areas that are sort of majority black beneficiary are the way that they are. But most of that will come down to money.
Right. Staying on this area of professional athletes, professional sports stars for a second, why, in your opinion, do you feel that people can unfairly give credit to a sports professional, regardless of the color of their skin, if they perform well for their team, their country, you know, their community in some way, but then they have a completely different opinion of that somebody when they can't attach them to their cause?
Because we're tribes, you know, we are tribal peoples. We always have been, and because it's about us versus them, and a lot of people, how people sort of derive solidarity in the world is to define an us, you know. But in order for there to be an us, there has to be a them. There is no us without a them. And so once you put on, you know, the shirt and you start to perform in such a way that benefits that organization, that benefits the us, you get a pass. You know, you can perform your way to a pass. But take that shirt off, or have a series of bad games, or step out of line, and that us becomes blurred. Look at the for the English in the crowd. Look at the experience of Raheem Sterling from Manchester City. Yeah, he's one of the best players in the league, one of the best in the country, arguably one of the best in Europe. But he buys his mum something you don't like, or he buys a watch that you disapprove of, and all of a sudden it's like, ooh, I'm not sure about this guy. And why is that? Is it because he's bought a watch, or is it because of the other narrative around him that you've been fed? The sort of the tattoos he's got, the flashiness that comes with it, as if it's different to any other footballer that's out there, because it's not. And why is that? And do we ask those questions? So the us versus them narrative is what enables people to look at someone who they identify, even if temporarily, as one of them, but don't afford that to other people of their ethnicity or of their social standing. And John Barnes, you know, typified that. A lot of people won't necessarily know who John Barnes is. He was the first black player to, I think, the first black player to play for Liverpool, one of the biggest football clubs in the world. And he had bananas thrown at him when he was on the pitch. And you know, there was an anecdote of a couple of Liverpool fans talking back in the day and discussing, all of these black people, all these, excuse the language for it, but all these darkies coming in and trying to take over our game. And so, what about that John Barnes plays for your lads then? Oh yeah, but he's all right. He's one of ours. And it's that mentality that unfortunately allows people to temporarily grant people, you know, some equality if they perform in such a way that benefits you or your mentality.
So it's almost as simple as saying is, if you see yourself in someone, or a quality in someone that you admire in yourself, then in some ways, regardless of skin tone or anything else like that, you can champion it. But if in any way you feel that person is taking something from you or acting in a way that is outside of your character, then you'll build an image around that validates almost a hatred or a frustration towards that person.
Yeah, I think the taking from you point is a really interesting point, because it is that. It's does the presence of this person contribute to me, or does it take away from me in my perception of what the field, and let's bring it back to competition, what the field of competition is. In a sports setting, if this person plays for my team, well then, you know, if they're good, then that benefits me so that they can have a pass. If that same person falls on hard times, no longer plays for the team, now is on street, maybe needs to sign up for social security, well, that's money that he's taken out of my pocket, and therefore all of a sudden I don't want him here, because he.
So we get this instant competitive judgment.
Yes, and what is
I'm even thinking about a scenario in your world is, you know, you worked the Olympics in 2012. And the Olympics in 2012 in London was a series of events that running into it, the country was embarrassed by the shape of the Olympics. During and after was immensely proud of the Olympics in 2012, both in terms of how we delivered as a country from a performance point of view, and also the operation of the event as a whole, and the overall experience was something we were proud of. I'm imagining through that time, and I might be wrong, that you use public transport, that you were bouncing around areas on London Underground and Docklands Railway, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm imagining these situations that if you show up as an employee of the Olympics, you're judged in one way. Whereas if you just showed up as a 6'4" black guy, you're judged in a very different way. Am I right in that assumption?
Yeah, yes, you are right. But I think the physical nature of, you've been a bit generous there, just 6'2". But the physical nature of being...
You've got heels on, buddy. Got heels on.
I'll put one for the example, for the mental image. The nature of being 6'2" and 16 stone is that I don't face much overt racism, because racism at the end of the day is the act of a coward. It's not a brave act. It's an act of desperation. It's an act of depravity, and an act of cowardice. It's an act of fragility. So I don't have to face that down much, because people don't have the guts to bring it to my face. So I don't, go around much in life experiencing overt racism. That tends to come in from people who are in a position of authority, where, their racism can be legitimized by their uniform, such as, the police. So it was less a factor for me to wear the uniform and be legitimized in that uniform. But I think the point remains that I have no doubt that that other people might have suffered. And in fact, actually, interesting story. So on the evening of the closing ceremony, I had a ticket, and I was trying to give it to someone. I had their ticket, but the rules around tickets were so extreme. And I'd left for the day. I was in my uniform, and so my card had been deactivated. I couldn't come back in, but I had to get this ticket to this person through an area of security. And I managed to talk my way in to one of the most secure events, probably ever, secure public events ever. Just enough to be able to deposit this ticket for someone to be able to enter the stadium. And in what world otherwise would I have been able to talk my way through gates and police? And in fact, I think the army was still there at the time, other than having that uniform on. Not a chance. And you don't have to be black to understand that that was not going to happen. It wouldn't happen for most people, let alone the fact that being black into it. So in that instance, the uniform definitely legitimized my presence for me.
Yeah, and in some ways creates a path to allow people to have a fair advantage and bend the rules. And in that scenario, it worked in your favor. And in many other scenarios, I think people can use a uniform to allow themselves to bend rules for their benefit as opposed to the benefit of others.
I think that's what a lot of the global conversation is right now, right? Given, where we are now, 12th of June, 2020, this is 2 weeks, going on 3 weeks after, George Floyd was killed. And the act that has, and this is a bit of a sidebar, but it seems wrong not to mention it in the context. The reason I think that act has galvanized so much reaction outside of the black community is that it was such an egregious misuse of the legitimacy afforded that man by his uniform when he put his knee on George's neck for 8 and 46 seconds. It's such an egregious misuse of that it forced people to make an assessment, and they could no longer look away. And all of those narratives of us and them, whenever these things happen, the narrative comes out, well, why were the police interested in him in the first place? And we had a history of this, that, and the other. But And those narratives come into play to legitimize the actions of the police force or whoever the authority is, because without that legitimacy, the police force is null and void. So they delegitimize the existence of the individual. But the equation just broke that time because it was so egregious, it was so disproportionate that it forced us all to look at it and make a judgment and say, where do I stand on this? Do I stand for the side of, well, you know, better the rule, the protection of the many from the police force versus the life of the few? Or do I, as an individual, say, I just can't countenance that is the way that society can operate? So, you know, the legitimacy afforded people by positions of authority is so often misused in our society. And you know, my hope of what comes out of George Floyd's, don't call it a sacrifice because he didn't make the conscious decision.
Yeah, it wasn't a choice, right?
You know, what I hope can come out of that is people can start to ask these questions, you know, as you have, of what does fairness actually mean in competition, and when will I speak out against unfairness, versus when will I accept that some of it is just the way that it is. Because both situations are out there, but it's, you know, they're not equal on the scales. There are some times where people go too far.
I just want to come at you with a couple of other angles of questioning, and one is in this area of uniform, right? We've seen how a uniform can give you a pass to do things in another way. There's also acceptance that says in the workplace that you have to look a certain way, dress a certain way, behave a certain way, in the same way show up in a uniform in order to be able to get yourself through certain doors, using the same metaphors that you talked about earlier on. What stories were said to you in your life when you were applying for jobs, when you were looking to be able to create opportunities for yourself, when you were looking to be able to get through some of those doors, about the uniform that you should wear in order for you to be able to give yourself an edge or give yourself a chance when competing for a role?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I mean, so much of this from the Black experience, I'll start with, revolves around hair, and hairstyles, and particularly for Black women. And my brother, one of my brothers, wears his hair in dreadlocks, and when he is applying for roles, he has in the past, you know, we've had the conversation of whether it would be beneficial to him to trim them, because they present to people the opportunity to staple on him, you know, a discriminatory preconception of who he is and what his capabilities are. Now, my brother's not having any of that, rightly so, and he wears his hair how he wants to. But the question arises, and some people, you know, shy away from sending a picture in with their CV because they think, what about this picture will discriminate against me? Is it my looks? Is it color of my skin? Is it the way I dress? And I think we're all aware somehow that there is a game to be played. You know, there's a tune that you've got to march to, and I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that. Companies are entitled to set a work culture. They're entitled to set, you know, a way that they would like their representatives to present themselves. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But again, it's all in the gray area, and it's how far does that, you know, expectation go into pervading my ability to express myself as an individual. And I think, again, it's all wrapped up in, yes, there are rules to the game. Yes, some of them just exist and just are what they are. But which ones of them can we objectively look at as a progressive society and say, you know what, that's probably not okay that you're doing that. And when people are discouraged from writing their real name on a job application because they think it will go against them, and women have been suffering this of every race for as long as there have been women in the workplace. You know, if I apply for that as a woman, am I less likely to get it? If I apply for that as an older person, am I less likely to get it? So I don't think, I think that the question of uniform isn't about just what we wear, right? It's about what are the elements of us that identify me or allow someone to characterize me, as that's what a uniform is, and how will they affect my ability to compete for something that I'm trying to attain.
And I push that a little bit harder as well there's a natural feeling, I think, amongst many, and I've heard this talked about in Black communities as well, is that there is this, we need to conform to compete type thing as well. And whether that is putting a suit on, dressing a certain way, behaving with more white tendencies, whatever that might be, is how much have you seen that as a reality? How much of that is a conversation that happens behind the scenes when trying to actually win back market share in maybe a white dominant environment?
Yeah, and I think this comes back to what I was saying before about the microaggressions in the workplace, because the understanding of it is that if I don't conform to the idea that people recognize, which is, as you said before, an idea that is they can identify themselves in, then they start to assign the differences between us to the visual difference between us, which is the color of our skin. So, for instance, if someone looks at my work and says, "Ah, yeah, they're driven, but their drive seems a little different. I'm not sure what it is. Maybe what can I assign that to?" And we assign it to things that we find obvious. And for people thinking, "Oh, well, again, he's playing the race card." No, we do this all the time, and we do it with men and women all the time. It's the old argument around, "Oh, you can't have women in positions of power; they're too emotional."
Yeah.
And that statement,
They're probably going to leave and have kids soon, or any of
they're probably
those,
going to leave and
just
have kids.
preconceptions.
Right, exactly. And it's these preconceptions that exist, and so to pretend they don't exist is a fallacy. It's just unintelligent. These things, of course, they exist. The question is, can we identify them as they are imposed upon us, and can we identify them as we try to not impose them upon others? Because to question whether or not stereotypes are employed in the selection of who gets what in the workplace is madness, because we've been doing it since there has been a workplace. And I think a lot of, again, what this sort of period of change in the social conversation is about is finally starting to recognize some of these things and bring the conversation out into the open. It's not playing the race card, it's not playing the woman card, it's just recognition of the facts.
So what would you say to people in the position of leadership that maybe right now are thinking subconsciously that maybe they have created an environment that's less than fair? They want to be able to fuel competition through their organization. They want to be able to fuel competition through their team. And they don't want to be seen as, well, I'm just giving somebody a leg up, I'm checking a box, I'm doing those things. They actually want to be able to create a more level playing field. What does that look like? How do they be able to make it a fair rise to the top? How do they create more of a fair environment for people to compete on?
That's a great question. And, just first, the why is really key here, right? Because businesses are capitalist enterprises in the way they operate, whatever their end goal is, in the way they operate. And the more you compete, if you drive competition, the more different individuals find their plus 100%. And if you have 5 individuals who reach 110%, you've got an extra 50% there that you didn't have before as a business, and you can turn that into value. You can turn that into extra efficiency. That's innovation. That's where it comes from. If I am precluded from being able to enter that competition, given the fact that I don't fit some stereotype of yours, you lose my contribution. And everybody loses from that. And this goes back to what your illustration, great one about LeBron James, Beyonce. They rise to the top because they're the best. If you give people the opportunity to rise to the top, you get the best of them. And I don't think it needs to be complicated. We understood that we needed to give women a better opportunity to perform in the workplace. And to do that, we knew that we needed more voices of women in the boardroom. Not because it's a tick box exercise, not because now I've got 3 women there, so my quality job is done. It's because having the voice of a woman at the table of power enables you to shape the business around providing better for women within the business. And it's, I work in marketing, we see it all the time. people create these messages aimed at an audience, and the audience receives it and says, "What the hell was that? Why did you think I was going to react well to that?" And you look in their decision-making process, and they don't have anyone of the audience representing, making the decisions around talking to that audience. And the same is true of the boardroom. If you don't have, and I'm not saying you need to go out, find someone black in your organization and make them your CIO, your COO. What I'm saying is, if their voice isn't heard in the boardroom, how can the boardroom speak to them? Because how can you know what it is that you need to say? And I think that's the real lesson. Don't go out there right now and say, "Oh, I need to escalate, black brothers and sisters into our corridors of power." You want to do that, fantastic, but that's not where this has to start, and it's certainly not where it ends. What you have to do, what we all should want to do, is to make sure that the experience of the black employee is heard and understood. And you can do that as simply as calling a meeting. And don't be bashful about it. Don't say, "Oh well, how will it look if all of a sudden I call all the black people in my building into my office and say I want to talk to you?" It is what it is, and I assure you that they would rather be heard than not be heard.
And I'd probably push that even one stage further. Much of the world is made up with different user groups full of people. And if you are not having those voices involved in leadership and senior discussions within your organization, your community group, or whatever, then what you're actively saying is we are not of service of those people. So you
Absolutely.
cannot be surprised if they choose to not do business with you, they choose to not want to work for you, that they choose to not be able to show up as supporters of your cause, whatever that cause may be. You're almost not open for business for that group of people if you're not considering their point of view. And by considering their point of view, that means understanding their point of view, not deciding you understand their point of view because you've seen it, watched a movie, or got a precursed idea.
So absolutely, you're absolutely right. And I worked with a skincare brand, and we were going through a portfolio rationalization exercise and deciding what we would do with, a bit too much detail, but you'll understand the point. What we would do with the large SKU for body moisturizer, not a massive seller in this country. And I said, you're missing the most obvious of blatant tricks here is you need to start marketing this to the black community. Black people go through skin cream like you wouldn't believe, but you haven't, but you've got this product on your shelf and you're not selling it to them. You're just putting it there with the same old message you've always used, aimed at your majority market, which is your white, 34 to 45-year-old woman doing the shopping. Tailor the message, you'll shift the product. And literally, no exaggeration, a room of 25 of our best marketers turn around to me like, "Wow, that's really interesting. Wow, we've never discussed that before."
Like,
you've never discussed marketing skin cream to black people, because what is painfully obvious to me, you've never considered because you've never asked.
Didn't even know because you were, ignorantly unaware, I think is probably the easiest way to put it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And how can you change that if you don't ask the question, if you don't start the conversation?
Okay. Final line of questioning before I ask the two questions I'm asking everybody on this series is, both you and I have fairly rich and deep experience of both the UK and the United States. We're actively global citizens, spent a bulk of our time traveling the world in a variety of different ways, have a fairly unique lens on the world as a result of that kind of experience. But one thing I'm hearing a lot right now from a competition point of view is people in the UK, when we're talking about the race issue, saying, yeah, but it's not as bad here in England as it is in America. Or just creating some form of competitive comparison that says it's okay because it's not as bad as where it is elsewhere.
Yeah.
And, talk to that for us for a second.
So we had an MP, black member of parliament, stood up, Kemi Badenoch, I think her name is, stood up in the House of Parliament during a debate on the protests in London last week and said, Britain is one of the best places in the world to be black. We can't be an overtly racist society. And there's so much damage in that statement, particularly coming from a black woman, because if you look at the economic facts of it, uh, being born Black British puts you I can't remember the number off the top of my head, means you'll average to be 15 to 20% less in terms of your earnings, because you're Black British, as a demographic, versus being born white in this country. And that's being born in this country. And so what are we saying? That it's not as bad because I'm less likely to be killed by the police? Are we saying it's not as bad because we have roads and houses? What is the standard here that means that you feel comfortable making a statement that it's not as bad? Now the US is always going to be an outlier because the US is a country of extremes, right? It's so far on the edge of capitalism and violence, and they have a limitless appetite for both. That country will absorb violence and absorb the quest for money endlessly, absolutely endlessly. And so in comparison to what we have there, what we have here will always look less bad. Of course it will, but that doesn't mean that it's less impactful on the lives of the citizens. It means, sure, the KKK is not going to come marching around my house, but that's not the yardstick. The yardstick is, again, to bring it back to competition, am I able to walk into this competition with a fair set of circumstances? And if they're not fair, surely tell me they're not fair because of the color of my skin. Tell me there's something else about it.
Okay. And what it means in that scenario is you just want to be stood on the same start line as someone else. You understand that what happens on from there is down to performance, but the start line is what we're looking for to be the same for more and more people.
It's a great point. This is not about handouts. This is not about to uplift Black people. You have to give them things that they haven't earned. I'm not talking about that. And no, I don't think anyone's talking about that. What we're talking about is don't make us start 5 meters behind the start line. Let us start with everybody else. Let me have no additional hurdles. You're all running 100, I'm doing 110 hurdles. Of course, I'm not going to, be in the same competition because the race circumstances aren't the same. You've got to equalize the circumstances and then let the chips fall where they may, because that's what fair competition is.
And that's a conscious decision for people in leadership in every area of life, is to say, what am I doing to make sure that the start line is as close to the same for as many people as possible, if what we want to do is we want to have fair competition?
Absolutely. And let's talk about the environment just quickly. The reason that companies are changing their view to the environment is because consumers are demanding it. And I think consumers will start to demand of businesses now. I saw a poll the other day that 60% of Americans last week said they would make a decision on a purchase based on that supplier or producer's attitude towards what had happened to George Floyd. What statements have they made? What was their outbound marketing message around that? Because it's a situation that has forced us all to examine a line in the sand, understand and acknowledge that it's there, and then stand on one or two sides of it. And this is what businesses, I think, need to and in fact can do from the top down, because it can't all be done top down. But what they can do is say, look, we've had a look internally, we have assessed some shortcomings, and we will do more and commit to doing more as a business to overcome that. And again, that doesn't mean that all of a sudden you go and you launch a Black scholarship program. You can if you want, that's fantastic. But this is not all of a sudden about becoming an economic philanthropic organization. It's about ensuring that when I come to your door, my passage through your business can be as equal as that of the next person and defined by my ability, not by anything else.
Okay. I will use the fact that you're British as well for a slightly curveball question, which is what would you say to British listeners to better understand the difference between the inequalities through race in America versus the inequalities in race through the United Kingdom? How would you help them understand the differences and maybe understand the differences in behavior of certain groups of people because of those differences?
Yeah, it's again a great question, dude. Good questions. I think again, if we look at the extreme first, we look at America. Um, the existence of black people in America is a heritage of slavery, of course, as we all know and acknowledge. And so, what happens with the ideal of white supremacy in America is that they say, the sort of rhetoric is, well, you are only here because you were a slave and you were descended of slaves, and your lives were less meaningful then, and that continues now. Children of slaves, descendants of slaves, cannot be equals to me. I have been taught that as a white, person my whole life, and I have that, and I will hold on to that because that makes me more than you, and I'm not going to let that go. And so that the idea of white supremacy there is very clear, and it brings images to mind that we all have. But when you talk about white supremacy in the UK, it becomes very uncomfortable because here we tend to believe we're more of a decent peoples. We're not as extreme. We're quite fair. Oh, we abolished slavery, so we can't be that racist. All of this stuff. But as big and frightening as the two words white supremacy put together are, if you break them down, all they come down to is furnishing an environment in which white people feel confident and comfortable discriminating against non-white people, and doing so on the basis of nothing other than the color of their skin. Now, when you talk about groups and organizations, the police is always the sharp end of this because the police are a representation of the laws of a society. And so when those laws are disproportionately wielded against a group of that society, it speaks for society as a whole because we all allow it, we all accept it. We all know that black people are profiled by the police. We all know that black people are profiled in their cars, on the streets. We know that black people, I think, make up 8% of deaths in custody versus 3% of people in custody, or whatever the statistic is. It's the disproportionality of it. Now, we turn a blind eye to it because it's not people being executed in the street. But that's your question again of what is the yardstick? Somewhere here is equality. Let's put it up here, where somewhere down here is being killed in the street. And in the middle is a whole myriad of ways that people are discriminated against. And so what I'd say to people in the UK is, just because you can see wealthy black people, just because you see footballers who can earn, or businessmen who can earn, or this guy sitting here telling you that he earns good money, don't think that it means that the circumstances aren't set against us. And as an example that everyone in the UK is familiar with, we all know what happened with Prince Harry and Meghan Markle leaving the country. They were overt and explicit and very detailed in the reasons why. And if the grandson of the Queen of England cannot rise above the racism that his wife is subjected to and has to leave the country, just let that sink in. For the grandson of the Queen of England, his wife was subjected to such racial prejudice in this country, in plain sight of everyone, that he left. The grandson, fifth in line to the throne, or eighth after the kids, whatever he is, left the nation on that basis. And we yet didn't question racism in this country. And that's mind-blowing if you think about it. I mean, again, it gets a pass because he's not first in line. What if Prince William had married a black woman and said, you know what, lads, I can't be having this. This is out of order. I'm off. Would we have questioned it then? I don't know. But it's easy to sweep under the rug when it's not people being killed on camera. Fine, we're desensitized to violence. But it's time to wake up now, because the blind eye is facilitating the mistreatment of thousands and thousands of your fellow citizens.
Chris, we could talk this subject like we talk many subjects forever. There are two final questions I want to ask of you. and they're about words. You know, words are my thing. I know you have an affinity for words through many of your side projects too. But I want to ask for a word, an adjective that describes how you're feeling about how everything's going on right now. What might be a word that best describes Chris Lambert's feelings about current events?
A word. I think the two words in my head are wary and optimistic, and I'm afraid I'm going to go with wary. And the reason being that there's a very powerful conversation you can watch whenever you come across this conversation between me and Phil. It's between Professor Cornel West, and Anderson Cooper on CNN, and it's quite an emotional conversation. But you know, Cornel West is in his 70s, black man in the US. He's seen it all. He's seen this all before. He's seen people take to the streets. He's seen hope, and he's seen the false dawns. He's seen Martin Luther King achieve rights. He's seen President Obama rise to the top, and he's seen that we still only have the conversation on equality when someone either gets right to the top or gets murdered in the street. And in the in-between, it's easy enough for people to turn a blind eye. So I am enthused by the fact that the global conversation is everywhere now. But I am also wary of the fact that false dawns have happened before. And if we don't keep the momentum up and keep the pressure on the institutions and the governing groups that, you know, enable this inequality, this will be another false dawn. So sadly, the word I'm going to settle there for is wary.
Okay. And the second word I'm looking for is based on another question. I want you to think 12, 18, 24, 36 months on from now. What might be a word, an adjective that best describes what you would like to see in the world different to what exists today?
That is, again, a very good question, because the conversation around momentum, and as I've just said it, is okay, well, what's next? What is next? And if so much of this is an intangible, how can we tangibly measure change against it? And so for that reason, my second words will have to be, again, the two I'm deciding between are education and legacy. And I think it's going to be legacy. I think the conversation here is not for our generation, Phil. That ship has sailed, man. You know, people of our age and you know, who with an open mind, they can change their minds. But hey, you know, the deed is done for our generation. The question is, what does it look like for the next generation? And I think the conversation around statues is unfortunately blighted by a lot of nonsense, but it's a good one for us to have. Who are our heroes? What do we worship? And I think that needs to feed into education, where people are taught about Black people, not as people who are visitors here because our parents were invited as the 60s, but people who have helped to shape this society and who are a valid part of it. And I think that all of these elements of the social conversation need to add up to a legacy that will allow us to really assign meaning to what happened to George Floyd. And we humans love that. We like to assign meaning to life and death. And if in 3 years we can turn around and see that there was a legacy from his death, that was social change and continuous conversation education, then that really will be progress.
I like that. Chris, thank you for sharing, and thank you for sharing everything you've shared with us today on Words with Friends. If people want to continue the conversation with you, people want to find out more about you and the work that you do, how can they do so? How can they continue the conversation? Where should we point them?
You can find me on Twitter at Lambs English, or you can find me on LinkedIn. I can't remember my LinkedIn handle, but you'll find me Chris Lambert. I work Chris Lambert 7, I think it is, but Chris Lambert. I work at Convatec currently, so you'll find me there, Chris Lambert from Harvard. Or I'm sure that, you know, if people wanted to reach out to us, that they'd find a way to do so through your channels as well.
Sounds good to me. Well, Chris, thank you. Really appreciate your time, your contributions. I know you've got a lot going on right now. Looking forward to catching up, round of golf, glass of whiskey, something fun sometime soon.
As soon as we can, mate. Definitely. Cheers, Phil.
Thank you once again.